Hello, you're listening to Underscore, a show by the Chicago Graphic Design Club. I am your host, Christian Solorzano. My guest today is Liam Guiritan, a designer who grew up being told that there were only two career paths worth taking and chose neither. Together, we will explore how curiosity became his education, how code became his medium, and how a childhood of taking things apart and never putting them back together turned out to be exactly the right training for a design practice built on experimentation. We also get into what craft means when your tool is a terminal window, why American design tends to underestimate its audience, and why in an era of infinite digital surfaces, print is the thing giving Liam the most hope. As always, if you enjoy conversations like these, we appreciate your support when you leave us a rating wherever you listen. Enjoy the conversation and thank you for tuning in. What's up, Liam?
Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
So we are recording this on Saturday, April 4th, and it's rainy. We're both in Oak Park. This is your third time, or your second time in the studio, third time that we've hung out in the last month.
Yeah.
You came to my house, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, and then you came to the studio last week, and now you're back. Mm-hmm. So you must, we get along, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
How's your Saturday?
Not bad.
Yeah.
Pretty slow, I would say.
What does Liam do on what's your like Saturday morning routine?
I usually sleep in a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
just because I don't get that chance to sleep in when I work throughout the week.
Yeah.
Because I'm up during the week. I'm usually up at 4 a.m.
Okay.
But Saturdays, I usually try to sleep in until like 7,
Mm-hmm.
8. Because really, there's no reason for me to be up at 4 a.m. on a Saturday.
Are you the kind of person that wakes up without an alarm, or do you require an alarm?
I need an alarm. Yeah, I need an alarm because otherwise, I think sometimes I can let my body wake me up. For example, if I'm staying at like a friend's place, usually I don't necessarily need an alarm. But for me, just to prevent me from like oversleeping, I need one.
Yeah. And is your phone your alarm?
My phone is my alarm, and this actually happened yesterday, but I usually try to keep it on like arm's reach away and usually like the other side of the room. Because what happened was yesterday for work, I almost missed my train because my phone was right next to me, and I've noticed that if my phone is right next to me, I'm more likely to just mindlessly snooze it. Whereas if it's like on the other side of the room,
Yeah.
like my body has to get up to turn off the alarm.
And what kind of alarm sound person are you? Do you like a soothing sound, or do you like the ship is sinking and we're all gonna die?
I think I had the default iPhone one, so I think that's like the one that's like, hey, get up. I think I did mess around with like changing it, where it was like the more calming one. But I kind of like the one where, like, to your point, like the ship is sinking.
Yeah, but that's usually the one that if I for example if I have to catch a flight or something, if there's something that has a hard deadline, I will default to the crazy scary ship is sinking sound. Yeah, I remember a long time ago I had an Android phone, and I had an application that required me to do some math, like a math equation, in order to silence the alarm. And,
What equations would it give you? Like, would it be like simple equations, or would you have to like?
It was. I mean, it was. To me, it was complicated because I'm not very good at math. So I'm sure to other people it was like quite simple math, but like, for me, it took a lot out of me.
Yeah.
Because you had to sometimes, get a piece of paper or just like.
I'm just imagining it's like your alarm goes off, and then you have to like solve, I don't know, like the quadratic formula, or find like the angle of a triangle at like 5 a.m. for example.
Yeah. So you and I have crossed paths many times. We've been crossing paths through the Chicago Graphic Design Club, and then also you've participated in our publication faculty, and you're going to be in the upcoming issue number 3. And one of the things that I really like about you is that you're always experimenting with new technology, and that new technology tends to be code, which to me I find really fascinating because I think graphic design, when we learn it, we usually think of it as just this stuff that you do with Adobe software. And I know that you mentioned in the past that you took a playgraming class at DePaul. So you're an alum of DePaul. You were class of 2023, 22?
This is always a story when people ask me. So I'm technically class of 2023 because I started at DePaul 2019, but I had to stay 2 quarters just to finish up some requirements. So I walked in 2024.
Okay. And I'm also a DePaul alum. I graduated in 2016. So we're both Blue Demons. How do you feel? What does it feel like to be a Blue Demon?
I mean, I don't.
What does it mean to you?
I don't really think much about it these days. I think like the first year out of, or I shouldn't say the first year, but like the 3 months after I finished, I was like, oh, I wanted to stay connected to DePaul, but I think more recently I'm like ready to close that chapter of my life because I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I just think I don't want to dwell too much on the fact that I went to DePaul.
Okay. Yeah. But I know that you mentioned that at some point something you'd be interested in doing is teaching.
Yes.
So you never know. Maybe you'll find yourself like I am,
Maybe
like teaching at DePaul sometime.
Maybe.
Yeah. I always, because I went to DePaul and I also teach at DePaul, I feel as if I'm the student that never left town and they still kind of hang around the parking lot and they and on occasion they'll buy like cigarettes for the students and yeah, I get a little self-conscious sometimes about the fact that I'm still in the DePaul orbit. But I mean, it's not that I like DePaul, I just enjoy teaching and teaching at DePaul was like a pretty seamless point of entry.
I mean, I think it also helps too that you both want like that you're teaching at DePaul while that you were also a student because I feel like you would have that insight for like that DePaul perspective.
There's one class that I'm teaching, and I'm teaching in the classroom that I used to be a student at, which is kind of funny.
Is it in the Daily building?
It's in the 14 East Jackson.
The fifth floor.
Fifth floor, like
always
506 or something.
Always, 506.
Yeah. I used to be a student. I used to sit over there, and I sit over here. So it's kind of.
Were you a student that sat in the back of the class or the front of the class?
I used to sit in the front, middle part of the class.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to always ask questions, and I was also, even if I didn't have a question, I would just I always liked talking, and I was that student that would always raise their hand, and I'm sure people probably found it a little annoying. Cause
no, I know, I feel you. Yeah, because even on night classes, I'd still sit in the front of class. I think my preference was closer, probably like you, the front center, or usually like the front left, closer to the door. Because it was like, if I had to use the bathroom, I would feel weird having to get up in the middle, go across people that were like paying attention. Whereas if I'm near the door, I can just like kind of sneak on out.
You don't have to like walk past a projector and like everyone sees your big shadow. But it's interesting because you can always kind of get a sense of the type of student someone is based on where they sit. And over the course of like the last 4 years, I've been noticing patterns that, it's like, all right, if people sit here, this like most likely means something like this. Yeah, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. So since you've finished college, what have you been doing? Because you've been doing things with new technology or with code. And when I think of you as someone that, in my mind, I think of you as this scientist because you walk around with a little black box.
Oh, not the black box.
Yeah, and I feel like that black box needs some kind of like sticker on it that says danger or
no, I don't think that would help my case.
Like handle with care, or this side up. And then you open up your box, and inside your box you have these little devices. That for someone that is unaware of what those devices are, it looks like you are putting together some kind of device that might explode.
Yeah.
So, but it's not that. You're actually doing some pretty cool things. And so I think of you as someone that is giving yourself your own form of education. You're someone that's really, really curious, and I feel like there tends to be a restlessness that I notice within people that are always keen to learn. And I wonder if you agree with that assessment of you.
I think it's two parts. One of it is because I didn't during college, I kind of just followed the curriculum. Really, occasionally, I think outside class, I would experiment a bit, but not really much with code. So in other words, I kind of played it safe. And then the other part of it is just like letting the curiosity part explore it, kind of not really worrying about having to meet deadlines, and more so just being like, oh, I don't have to worry about submitting this assignment that's due. Let me take some time to look at this technology.
And with all that stuff, it requires a lot of discipline, because I think the thing about stepping away from a structured institution like a university is that once you leave, there's no longer these guardrails that require you to have deadlines or to submit assignments and so forth. But I know that for you, I'm imagining that do you give yourself deadlines, or how do you usually go about working on personal things?
I think I kind of look at projects in the quarter or quarterly. So I kind of think about it like, okay, what's a big project that I can do in 3 months? Other times it's like, okay, what's something I can get done in 1 month? Because as much as I like doing that exploration, I think exploration without guardrails can get kind of dangerous. Because it's like, okay, because then you start to like overthink like different directions. So like kind of having those restrictions kind of forces you to like start being more intentional with how you approach like decisions.
Yeah. And is that intentionality something that you've always had, or what were you like as a kid? Were you always tinkering with things?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think I was always a curious child growing up. I wasn't really, as much as I do remember playing with like Hot Wheels and like action figures. I think my toy growing up was Legos. So I think it was like, okay, I think that was kind of like the start of like problem solving. It was like, okay, with this instruction, how can I fit these pieces together in a way that will lead to X idea? Other times, I think that curiosity fostered or was apparent in other ways. I remember there was this Hello Kitty radio that my sisters had that I took apart. Did I put it back together? No. And I don't think my mom was too happy about that. Because and taking things apart and not being able to put them back together, I think was a recurring pattern in my childhood. And like, as like a 5-year-old, or I shouldn't say 5-year-old, but as let's say like a 10-year-old, not knowing what a capacitor does or not knowing what this wiring does, I think leaves a lot of room for like interpretation.
Yeah. And as you were growing up, were your parents, or did you have a household that was pretty encouraging of all of these things, or did you experience some tension?
I don't think it was tension, because for like my parents, how they grew up, there were only 2 career paths, and it was usually like in the medical field or within engineering. And I think when it came time to picking classes, before even approaching them about it, I was like, oh, I want to do something within the performing arts, because I was a band kid. Started playing clarinet in the 4th grade, and then once high school came around, I switched to percussion after my older sister was like, hey, clarinet, like chair competitions get kind of, or not necessarily competitions, but chair positions get competitive, so you're probably better off switching to percussion. So initially I thought I wanted to go into music or something within the performing arts. And then I think I remember it was like, I think around like sophomore year, around the time that I think I was like the topic of like, oh, what do you want to study starts to be introduced. I think I just said, okay, I'm interested in pharmacy just to like fit within that direction that my parents had followed. And I remember asking the person that gave me my flu shot, like, hey, I'm interested, like how do I get started in this? And he's like, oh yeah, there's this program I think at like Northwestern. I don't recall the exact location. But also around this time, I was at like a dual credit program at like a local community college. So a portion of my day was spent at the community college learning like what was called digital media design. So that was like my first entry into like Photoshop and all those programs. I remember telling you in passing that that was like also the first time I used Adobe Dreamweaver.
But there is, to me, I do see that there's a engineering component to your design practice. I don't think of it as merely, I think often people that get into design, it's usually from a artistic lens or a self-expression point of view. And for you, I get the notion that it's more about the process and the exploration and like the backbone of what makes things possible. So I know that you mentioned like engineering being something that maybe you felt encouraged to pursue, but I think you are doing a form
Yeah,
of
and
engineering.
it's kind of funny because I think I was like, no, I don't want to do what mom or dad did, and then that was me being like a rebellious teenager, and then 10 years later, here I am.
Their little black box.
Yeah, yeah, the little black box.
You need to get a lab coat.
I think the next review event, yeah, I think I'll consider getting one.
A little lab coat and maybe like a little mascot or a little animal that kind of follows you around, like a little rat or something.
Like Ratatouille in a way,
Yeah.
but with a lab coat instead of a cooking apron.
So to the various facets of Liam, I think that there's design, there is the engineering side of code, and then I know that music is something that you tend to be passionate about as well. I'm curious about all the different facets that you think come together to make up your philosophy, your approach, your way of thinking. I know that there's music, there's design, there's also code, technology, but is there anything unexpected that we wouldn't normally gather from the things that you do?
I feel like all the things I'm interested in are on the artistic side. It's like you mentioned like film, or not film, but you mentioned like music. I think another part of it is like the interest in like moving media, like film. Because I think everything's kind of, to your point, everything's kind of like interconnected. But I think if there's one thing outside that creative sphere that I think is somewhat interesting is like coffee.
Okay. I know you took a coffee class last weekend, Saturday in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about coffee, or what about just talk to us a little bit about that interest.
It's, in a way, there's like much like how music, there's like a theory to it, film and moving media, there's a theory to it. I think what I took away from the coffee class was that there's also a theory to coffee. And also kind of there's like a science aspect to it as well, like a tinkering. Because there's like the various variables that affect the taste of coffee. It's like, for example, with like pour over, it's like, how long, like what temperature is my water at right now? Like what beans am I using? How fast am I pouring this water? Like all of that, I think is pretty interesting.
And what about the thing that I always like to ask people is, at what point what was the first thing that you ever created that you felt like you were self-aware that you were creating something that was authored by you, if that makes sense?
Are you like in a way asking like what would I consider my earliest thing of like design?
Yeah, like your first creation.
I think it was a game board, and I think the I think it had been like the 6th grade in one of my computer classes. I can vividly remember it was like a blue gradient, some like hexagons. I think it had like some like danger, like the danger symbol, like that hazard waste thing.
Yeah. Do you remember how old were you?
Whatever age, at least in the States, you are when you're in like the 6th grade. I think that's like, my timing might be up, but around like 11, 12. Okay,
yeah. And when it comes to your experimentation with code, I think that in this like age of AI where you don't necessarily need to know the backbone or like the infrastructure of how things work, because for example, like today you can just type a prompt and like build a product, build an app, build a website, and so forth. But there is a advantage of understanding that infrastructure and that language that makes things happen. So for you, I've seen you, like the few times that you've been over, I've seen you tinker with your computer and sort of build things, and I've seen the frustration that sometimes comes with trying to type something and then it doesn't do what you want it to do. And I've seen that rather than you relying on like AI to assist you, you will go into like the documentation, or you'll sort of do it the analog manual way.
Yeah.
And I find that admirable, and I feel like that's something that will distinguish designers in the future, is like the people that are willing to subject themselves to the discomfort that comes with figuring something out, as opposed to just like defaulting to like a quick, AI response answer thing. So talk to us a little bit about the agony and suffering that comes with coding.
I think it's just like, to your point of like, for one, on the topic of AI, because I feel like that's a lot that's being discussed in our field. Because like for me, I think when I first started using AI, that was like at the the first part of my process, and usually like the immediate first thing I do when I kind of understand a topic, I don't know what. I can't necessarily pinpoint an exact moment when that changed, but more recently it's now like shifting to having it be the third piece of the process. I think more so recently, I kind of have it as like the third step of the troubleshooting, because of like that deep learning of like learning of like troubleshooting and figuring out, okay, like actually going in and seeing where things might have gone wrong. Because I think, yeah, AI is nice because it gives you that answer right away. But I feel like using AI to solve your problems, at least when it comes to code, if you don't know what the code is, if you don't know what the output is doing, then I feel like it's counterintuitive.
Yeah. So how'd you get into code? I know that when the last time that we spoke, you mentioned that you took a class in college, but you took a class before college too, right?
Yeah, and I think my computer apps class in roughly, I think it was the third or fourth, I think fifth or sixth grade, I think it was around then. We used a program called Scratch, and essentially it's kind of like code, but with Legos. So there were these like blocks, and they were like, I think each block was like a function or like a part of it. So you would have like, for example, like conditional statements. So you would have one block that would be like, okay, if, or it would be like if, and then you put another block that would set like the condition, and then it was just like putting pieces of the puzzle together.
And today, some of the things that I've seen you tinker with was you were experimenting with Arduino, and you were creating you were playing with a device that detects the humidity in a room, in an environment. And then you were also experimenting with another device that allows you to, that provides an output based on how close you are to the object.
Yeah.
And to me, what I find fascinating about that is that you're actively you're creating design outputs that respond to the environment. And there's something to me magical about that, because you're treating design as a collaboration with a space. And I think, when I was in school, and I think for a lot of people probably when they're in school, they think of they're trained to think of design as this flat, fixed medium. You create something, you print it, and then it's said and done. But you're like actively finding ways to collaborate with your environment. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what that is like.
I think that's interesting, because I think it kind of goes, this might counter what I was talking about earlier about constraints, but I think like, yes, constraints help provide guardrails, but sometimes those guardrails can be kind of limiting. So I kind of just imagine, really, I think at the core of it's just imagination of like, okay, like how would this code translate into something outside of design, or outside of like a printed poster? Like what would it look like if I incorporated augmented reality to it? And I think, it's interesting that you talk about like that interaction aspect of it, and I think some of it is rooted in collage of like, okay, and like the collaboration part of it too is like, okay, you have like this image, you have this image, how can I tear up this image and create into something like, something that's like remixed?
Because there's something beautiful about collaborating with a space, and also I imagine that it probably takes the pressure sometimes that we feel as designers, where we have to be in control of everything, because you're sort of surrendering creative variables to something else, and I find that to be kind of liberating.
Yeah,
Because it's like, all right, this could be blue or red, like it doesn't really matter. I'm not in control of that. It's up to the
algorithm.
to the algorithm. So I personally look forward to more of those type of experiences as time goes on, because I do feel I know for myself sometimes static fixed design can get a little bit predictable.
Yeah, and I think it was a talk from Studio Dunbar of like how the motion is. I shouldn't necessarily say definitively of it being the future, but more so just like that's something that designers should start looking more into doing, is like how can things be animated?
Yeah, that's just that thing's turning off. Yeah. Because sometimes when I see, for example, student work, I'll notice that, or just any kind of work, there you can have a logo or some kind of mark that on the surface could just look kind of ordinary and plain, but then usually the motion sort of is the breath that makes it come to life.
Right. And I think like motion kind of like elevates a brand's message, because like I think when we think of brands, we immediately think of logos, but I think another aspect to that is like how does that exist in the environment? And not saying, oh, like how does the logo itself like how does the logo itself exist in the environment, but more so how does like the brand's message exist in the environment? I think it was going back to Studio Dunbar and like their work for like the demo festival. I think the biggest thing was like, how does that work exist? Like, how does a motion poster exist at like a transit station, or how does that exist in, let's say, a billboard in a metropolitan area?
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking yesterday with my mentor, we were talking about the word craft, and we were saying, well, he was making a response to a previous conversation that I had on this podcast where we were talking about, me and the guest were talking about craft as this kind of bespoke component of creativity, because as everything turns into this rapid, as design becomes more of a commodity where people are just spitting out identities and websites and everything with the help of AI like super fast, I was mentioning in this conversation that craft is going to become this thing that people yearn for. And the response that my mentor gave me was that the word craft itself implies that it's sort of this antiquated thing of the past, where when we think of craft, we might think of bookbinding or letterpress or anything that is maybe out of the zeitgeist, like something that feels, just like bookbinding, for example, or like screen printing. But I think there is a craft, like you can still have craft even if you're experimenting with like AI and code and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious about what the word craft means to you and how you see craft. Just what are your thoughts on craft?
I think as you're saying that, I think the word that came to mind was like human. Like there's like a human aspect to craft. Like for example, like bookbinding. Yes, there's like there is like the right way to like bind something, but I think like that imperfection that comes with, like let's say, oh, like the paper isn't perfectly lined up, or in like, I'll say collage. I think collage is like a great example of craft. It's like how does this particular tear in the paper, what does that do?
Yeah, but do you think that I think there's also a craft to making a prompt, or a craft to code, or a craft to Like, I think craft, I'm still trying to figure out how to redefine that word and what it means, because I don't want craft to feel like we're referring to this romanticized
Yeah.
practice.
I don't think necessarily craft, like now, I don't think craft necessarily has to just be something that's analog. I think it can also be something, like you had mentioned, like translating more into like the digital realm. I think it's like also kind of like part of the craft is like syntax. For example, in code, there's many ways to do the same thing. For example, like I can draw ellipses in like two different, or a line of ellipses in two different ways. However, I write it is like special to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if someone else did it something a different way, that's wrong. We both achieved the result, but in a different way.
As you look into the future of your, whatever it is that you're doing, how do you, like, what are some of the benchmarks that you use to sort of assess your growth? And how do you measure up against yourself?
I think the biggest thing, because I'm someone that tends to get comfortable doing the same thing over and over again. So I kind of like playing things safe sometimes. But when it comes to like personal projects, generally like one of my benchmarks of quote unquote success is like how did I push myself in this project? And for example, like the weather project, which update, I'm not going through with it. It's more so like, okay, like although I'm not going through with the project anymore, it's like I learned this thing. And usually that's like what it is. It's like, what did I learn new? What like technology or what aspect did I learn new?
Yeah. And given that you're someone that finished school not too long ago, what would be your words of advice for someone that is finishing college or that just finished college, that is trying to sort of find themselves, like find their place in the industry?
I think just experimentation.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think that's where like the tone of voice and perspective come from.
And do you find that you're someone that is actively looking at trends, or because to me the work that you're doing seems to come from a place of you wanting to learn a new skill set and sort of the process informing the outputs. Whereas I notice sometimes, especially with young students, is that when they're trying to find their voice, they're looking to like Pinterest or Instagram or like any sort of like inspiration avenue to kind of inform their craft. But I don't get the sense that that's something that I don't get a sense that that's how you operate.
No, I before I would actually like use Pinterest and those like inspiration boards, because I know there's so many out there and I'm guilty of falling into that, but I think after a while it can kind of get soul sucking. Because it's like, okay, Pinterest, from how I understand it, it's like you'll click on one image and then it'll show a bunch of other images of like, oh, this is something similar. And then an hour will like pass by and then you'll just like forget what you had originally looked out for. So generally I don't try to look at like Instagram or Pinterest for inspiration. Usually I'll discover it. I think sometimes it'll be like a springboard into something. So, but other times it will be usually how like my inspiration will tailor is books will then direct me towards Instagram, but then also Instagram will tend to like direct me towards to books again. It's kind of like this like ping pong.
Yeah. And what are some of your personal, talk to us about your taste. What tickles your eyes?
I think typography.
Okay.
And I think like variable fonts too.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like, and just a good, or I shouldn't necessarily say good, but just interesting use of typography. Something that I've been interested in is like with like kinetic typography, yes, I've seen a lot of like sans serif fonts being used, but I'm curious to see like how I can use, I don't know, Times New Roman as an example, and something that's like moving.
So typography. What else?
I think image making, and I think image making in a way that that is responds to some type of environment, something with like motion.
And what are some things that you just can't stand? I feel like every designer has the things that they just super judgy about.
I know one conversation we had, I said Y2K, but I kind of take that back.
Oh, come on. You can do whatever.
I'll take it. And originally, well, because when I said Y2K, I think that was just like a spur of the moment thing.
Okay.
But I think sitting on it further, because when I think of like Y2K, there's like that human aspect to it. I think that's where I think about my work, you know, like the stuff that I've been doing. It's like there is still that tangibility, like that tangible aspect of it. That still is like rooted in it.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's the use of the replicating analog like textures, but with digital. So I think like an example is like the template packs where it's like a scanned image or this like the scanning effect. But my thing is like just print what you want the effect to be on, and then just scan it, because then it's like, unique and doesn't look like the next person that also used the scanning effect.
Yeah, I'm sick of textures. I think it's because I think you can put a texture on anything and it'll look cool.
Yeah. Like what textures have you been seeing?
Like I've noticed that there's a lot of gig posters, like concert posters,
like the rave posters.
Yeah, and it'll just be just a texture over it, and then it looks.
Oh, I think I see what you mean. Like the same like the distressed.
Yeah, like the type. It's almost like those vintage band T-shirts that you sometimes like buy new, but they look like they've been worn for like 20 years. And it's not that I don't like the look. Like I appreciate that look, but I feel as if when it's not authentic or real, you can kind of it comes across as kind of performative.
The way that I kind of think of it, it's like when H&M makes a vintage band tee.
Yes,
it's different than when, let's say, I'll just name drop, like Reckless Records has one.
Yeah, or like you buy it like used at like a thrift store. Yeah. But I feel like that distressed textured aesthetic, I think, is a nod to nostalgia, and I feel like there's a huge sense of nostalgia for like the past, and I think that's a reason why sometimes the Y2K look is interesting to people, especially for people that maybe did not exist in that time period. So and like I said, like I love the nostalgic look, but I don't know. I sometimes it's my pet peeve. Yeah. So, do you find that is there a period and is there a decade or a era of design that you feel you identify with most?
I think it's around the era of like Wolfgang Weingart, and then jumping a few around like the work of like Ray Gun and like Chris Ashworth, like around like that era. I think I see a lot of my roots coming from.
Okay, so you're not too keen on like modernism.
I think initially, I think my design. If you were to take my design work that I did in college, it would very much lean towards that direction of like, oh, modernism, everything's structured. Yeah. But then you post that up against what I'm doing now, it's like, who is this?
Yeah, I think of modernism as being like a rite of passage for a designer.
I think like Weingart, from how I remember it being introduced to me, is like, it kind of is an extension of like the modernism stuff, but more so like a different perspective of it. Because I think like Vanguard still used like Helvetica and
Yeah.
all the stuff like from modernism, but it was like, hey,
Like a middle finger.
yeah, in a way, like, yeah, like a middle finger.
I think you and we talked briefly in the past about the adjectives that as designers we sometimes use to describe
No, not this conversation.
to describe work.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting how yeah, just how as designers we just like what are the words that we default to when we're talking about our work. And I think when it comes to modernism, the words that I tend to hear repeatedly over and over and over again is always like simple, minimal, clean.
Yeah.
And I find that sometimes I also use those words as just like I just default to some of those words sometimes. And I wonder if how you've described your work has evolved over time, and if you were a third party looking at the work of Liam, how would you assess yourself? Like, what are some of the words that you would use to describe what you're doing?
I've been kind of reluctant saying this word because I think it's been overused as this experimental.
Okay.
Because it's like, I feel like the word experimental is so vague. Because on one side, experimental to me can mean the act of experimenting, but experimental can also look like something that like work that's breaking or that goes against the mold of what currently is considered a trend.
Yeah, that word experimental I find interesting because I love experimental work. But do you find that experimental is a process or a look?
I think it's more of a process.
It's a process. Okay.
I think it's more of the verb, like experimental more as like the verb as opposed to like the noun.
Yeah. And what would you say would be the counter to experimental as a process?
That's a wow.
Yeah.
I mean, the word's safe.
Okay. So like a safe process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or like straight to the point.
Okay. Yeah. My friend Sean and I, we've debated this word a handful of times because it's like, is experimental a look? Is it a process? Isn't everything inherently experimental? If you're, I don't know. It's like one of those things that I can't quite define.
Because I think of like what like experimental typefaces. It's like generally, well, I shouldn't necessarily say generally, but like at least what I've been seeing of quote unquote experimental typefaces is ones that like challenge like legibility, ones that you kind of have to like really sit with, so it counters like what we think of type design as being something that's like straightforward and easy to read.
Yeah. Do you think the job of the designer is always to communicate things clearly?
I think it's just to communicate an idea.
Okay. Yeah. I went to my friend Joseph Essex's house this past Thursday actually, and he's a designer that's been practicing since like the late 60s, early 70s, and a lot of his work would classify possibly as modernist. Like his objective was always to communicate things as clear as possible and to not necessarily adhere to a style, but more so communication for the sake of communication. And I asked him his thoughts on the experimental part of the 90s, where people like David Carson or like Chris Ashworth were sort of turning their back on legibility. And like David Carson in some cases, you know, like there's a famous editorial design that he did, which was an article about Brian Ferry, the artist behind Roxy Music, and if I remember correctly, David Carson found the article to be really boring.
So he like cited in like Wingdings or something.
Webdings, dingback font, dingback font. And I wrestle with that. It's like, is that good design or is it bad design? You know, I don't know.
I mean, as long as I think some message is communicated, I think that's one of the most important things. Because like if we go back to this idea of experimentation, it's like experimentation. When Let me backtrack a bit. It's like there's like I think about this idea from a book I read, and I think it's the Code Crafted book that I showed you a while back. Is this idea of this difference between generative design or creative coding and generative design, and the definition that I think the designer was like Patrick Hubner. It was, and then it's the definition that I agree with is like generative or creative coding is very like exploratory, kind of seeing what sticks, whereas like generative design is more intentional, and that comes from like establishing those like guardrails.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's something I think about quite often. Like these definitions and sort of, I think generally I find the work that is the most interesting is usually when it's sparking some kind of conversation about.
Yeah, and I know it's interesting because I think of a lot of my, I would say, inspirations I've been finding in design come from outside the United States. So a lot of stuff from like South Korea, for example, Japan, some stuff in like Switzerland, a lot of that. Whereas I feel like here, maybe it comes from here in the States. It's like there's always like the capitalist gain. Oh, how can this design be used to generate X amount of money?
Yeah, yeah. I know I've been on several projects where I'll attempt to maybe make things like push away from things being extra legible or super descriptive, and that tends to make people feel as if it's too risky. And I don't know. I feel like I feel like capitalism, at least here in the States, it does hold back design drastically. Yeah. Like even advertisements tend to all look identical, just like different color palette.
The same, like similar serif or sans serif font.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, it's like a sans serif because it's like medical, and it's a serif because it's like a
law firm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I that's why I look up to the stuff that you're doing and a lot of and many people that participate in things that the Chicago Graphic Design Club is doing, because I do get a sense that there's like these little pockets of people that are trying to do something that feels like it's new and different. Yeah. So as you look to the future of design and like maybe your practice, what are some of the things that give you hope? Prints?
I just think, kind of going back to like what we were talking about with the Y2K era, is that I think there's this like, I feel like a lot of people with the rise of technology and like AI are yearning for more like tangible physical things. So I think print is definitely giving me a lot of hope, just seeing how things can still exist in the physical world and not necessarily have to exist on screen.
Yeah. One of the things that, as we've been working on this third issue of our magazine, we've been contemplating this idea of low touch versus high touch. And I think, for example, a lot of digital experiences I would consider to be very low touch. It's like you interact with them, you see them, and then you swipe up and there's something new. And they all feel the same because they're all experienced on the same flat surface. But this notion of high touch would be the visceral nature of design. And I do feel as if our biology yearns for this high touch. And even this conversation that we're having right now, I would consider to be high touch.
Yeah, because we could have this, like I could have not had come in here and just had hopped on the Zoom call. Yeah. But I think something this about doing it in person, there's like something, like that connection can't be replicated.
Yeah. And I think that is, to me, that's what I look forward to just design amplifying more of these high touch scenarios because I don't know, they're necessary. I think they're crucial to the advancement of our craft or our disciplines, you know. And I think there's this embodied there's information that goes beyond language that we collect when we share space. And I think design needs to enable that more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there needs to be more of a. I feel like nowadays. I feel like there needs to be more community aspect to design,
Yeah.
or just more so collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In person, like person to person interaction.
Yeah.
Collaboration.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the upcoming event that you're going to be participating at in just a few days.
The Wonder Museum gig, right?
Yep. And by the time that this episode comes out,
I think it's gonna pass. I think, yeah, but if
damn it, it'll pass already. So tell us, how was it?
Yeah, let me travel to the future real quick. Oh, hold on. By the time this episode comes out, technically, I don't know. By the time this episode comes out, would I be traveling to the future or to the past?
So right now you have to travel to the future, and then
because technically when it comes out, I'd have to travel. So my recollection now, or me talking about it now, would be considered the future. But when this episode comes out, it technically would be the past.
So right now
this is getting too meta.
So right now it is April 4th.
Yep.
I want you to travel to April 11th, and then I want you to travel back to Saturday to April 4th, and then I want you to travel to April 13th.
When the episode's going to come out. Okay, let's. Okay, so by the time this episode comes out, I'm going to had just performed a live coding thing at the Wonder Museum, and the event. See, now I'm trying to think of tenses. So the event, by the time that everyone's listening, was called Audio Visual Code, and it is the first, at least in Chicago, of its kind, of what is called an algorave. So that takes the word algorithm and rave together, and the focus of it is. I shouldn't necessarily say focus, but more so what is performed is all code-based. The musical artists would perform with Strudel, which is a web-based performance environment, whereas like the artists, like the visual artists, would also perform with something that involves code. So, man, I'm like trying to think about the whole past, present, future thing.
There
but
will be a great flood.
Yeah, I can't. Don't trust me as a fortune teller, please. But so there are different ways you can like live code. So for the event, I would be perform. Okay, I'll talk in the present sense because this is getting too confusing. But for the event, my tool of choice is P5 Live, which is just an extension of the JavaScript library P5.js. And it's essentially like a live code editor. So all the changes that you make to the code would reflect in real time.
Okay. And what are the winning lottery numbers?
Let's quick do a commercial real quick.
No,
I wish I knew the winning lottery numbers.
No, I think that's awesome, and I will be there. I was there.
Thanks for coming to that.
It was great.
Would I be saying thank you now as of us recording? I'd say thank you in advance.
You already told me thank you.
I don't know.
You said thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and I said of course. That's cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we do time travel on this podcast.
Quantum mechanics is definitely at play right now.
Yeah, it all came from your little black box.
Yep. Schrodinger's cat? No, Schrodinger's box.
So we're almost approaching the end of our conversation, but I want to spend just some time talking about what are some of the things that you've been inspired by lately. I want to start off by asking you, what are some of your everyday carry items? What are some things that you can't live without?
Also my phone. Yeah, I'd say my phone.
Okay.
But only because I don't have any social media on my phone, with the exception of YouTube. But is YouTube considered social media? We can debate that later.
Okay.
But I think at the core of it is just like Spotify.
Okay.
I think just not having some form of audio to listen to is nice to have. I think that kind of helps like with like creative direction as well. It's because like I feel like if I listen to, let's say, ambient music, I'll have a very different result than if I were to like listen to like rock or jazz. And then on that extension, like headphones too.
What else?
Pen and paper.
Pen and paper. Okay. I feel like you're very particular about your writing instruments. So what do you write with?
I write on a Rhodia web something notepad. I forgot the name of it. I was gonna say WebSocket, but that's something totally different. Web Pals? I don't know.
Okay.
But that's one part of it. And then the other, my main writing utensil, I used to use pens, but I think I started to get a little bit sick of them. I'm writing with a Rotring Rapid 600 with I think the lead hardness is like the 4B.
Okay. Cool. And what are some other things?
I feel like I could see my phone again, but I think just a camera of some sort.
Okay. What do you usually find what is your eye typically drawn to?
Lights. And the way like how light, anything in, I find myself taking a lot of like long, at least with my phone, like the long exposures on phones. Yeah, anything in motion, I think I find really interesting.
And what about, you mentioned YouTube. What do you usually watch on YouTube?
Sometimes it's like watching other designers. Other times it's stuff within the realm of like with like the film industry, like VFX. Other times it's like stuff with like coffee. Other times it's like lectures, like design lectures.
So very studious.
Yeah. Other times it's like analyses of like films or explanation videos of films.
What about, do you watch any trash things, like any like pranks or?
Oh, it's been a while. I don't think, because I don't have Instagram on my phone. I think it's very hard for, like, I don't as much. I think before, I guess, I kind of have like my YouTube kind of catered, so where it's like I don't have my watch history. I can't scroll on YouTube Shorts.
Is that something you can?
I think you can modify it, because it would be really bad where I just get stuck in like scrolling through YouTube Shorts all the time, or whatever it's.
Yeah.
Everything is starting to sound the same. YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, everything sounds the same. But usually I think what I remember scrolling through a lot was like DIY stuff, or like like 30-second hacks.
I find all YouTube to be incredibly addicting. I know we've talked about internet browsers, and well, the last guest that I had, we spent some time talking about internet browsers, and the last time you and I spoke, you shared with me a browser that you use called Brave. Are there any other is there any other software, like you mentioned applications on your phone, like what are some of your computer software?
Essentially, usually on like my laptop, I'll have VS Code open, because that's generally I try to have all my like programs contained. So VS Code, so I can work with P5 or processing. But then I also tend to have the terminal open, because kind of just been trying to challenge myself of like how can I like open this application without having to right click or open my dock.
Yeah, it does feel really empowering to use terminal to do things that normally would require clicks and
Right. It kind of feels like hacking into the mainframe
Yeah.
in a way. Sometimes it is, but like more so it's just kind of going back to the whole curiosity thing of like, okay, like how can I achieve this step without having to rely on like user interfaces?
yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
That's a very open-ended question.
It is.
I don't think there is.
I want to encourage everyone that's listening to consider looking at, like, checking out your websites, and also hopefully giving themselves a permission to experiment beyond the Adobe Creative Suites, because
Yeah.
I feel like there's such a large untapped design playground that I unfortunately, at least in Chicago, I don't see many people like experimenting with.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this before. I recently don't like uninstalled Adobe.
Yeah. So cool. So we'll include if people have any questions, how do you prefer people reach out to you?
On either Instagram or email. I mean, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, but probably in those 3 orders. It's just my first name and my last name. So it's Liam, for Instagram, it's Liam .Guiritan, Guiritan. And I think my email, I have to remember because I have my email and my website are slightly different. I think my email is liam.guiritan@gmail.com. That sounds right. Yeah. And then my website is liam-guiritan.com.
Okay. And then just one last question. What makes you happy?
I think the ability to create. I think that is what makes me happy. And also just curiosity.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Liam.
Yep. And thank you, Christian, for having me.
This was fun. And thank you also for everyone that's listening. We're recording this in my studio here, and it was such a hassle to get all the equipment working. So if you're watching this on video, you'll notice that like about halfway through, my camera switched from the camera to my computer camera. So you are listening to something that we're trying out for the first time ever.
So honored to be a part of this experience and experiment.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Liam.
Yep. And thank you.
As always, thank you for sticking around till the end. Like I mentioned in the beginning, if you enjoy Underscore and you want to learn more about us, visit www.chicagographicdesign.club. And we really appreciate when listeners leave us a rating wherever they listen. So thank you for your support, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.